Hi, my name is Dr. Darren Sermon. I'm an instructor in New College. I would like to introduce Mark Ortiz as one of the speakers tonight for this gathering of TIE Talks. Mark is an excellent student who does incredibly profound work on the issues of social justice and workers' rights both in America and around the world. And I think you're in for a real treat to hear some interesting thought and insightful thought on some of the most relevant issues today. So let me welcome Mark Ortiz to TIE Talks.
So I'm Mark Ortiz. I am your resident political radical around these parts. I'm going to talk a little bit today about love, possibility, and process. I'm not really going to define these terms. I just like to make things challenging. Now, I just think it would go against the point of this entire presentation to actually just work with these firm definitions. So I'm going to let you kind of figure it out as we go, and hopefully it'll make some sense. So we really got to start thinking about possibility as a political concept. So I really, just to think about possibility, I want to first think about what it isn't. And to me, that's practicality. So I'm sure all of you have, at some point or another had an idea, some sort of political idea that you've thought of, and you're like, oh, that would be beautiful, the world could be so much better. And then someone's come along and said, oh, that's just not practical, it wouldn't work, humans just can't do these things. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I hear this all the time when election periods come around. It's like, oh, the lesser of two evils. I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils in this election. Which, why would you vote for evil in the first place? I mean, let's be real. That's a terrible idea. But really, I don't see anything changing. Each electoral cycle, it's more and more of the same, and they're just these two narrowly concerned political parties that are virtually, at this point, they could become one, and I don't know that I would be able to tell the difference. So I'm going to suggest to you that this whole practicality thing that you hear all the time, it's a way of authorizing and legitimizing certain ways of thinking about the world that fit within a certain structure, a certain specific structure. And I'm going to suggest further that it discourages people from being imaginative in their politics, from really stepping outside of their comfort zone, stepping outside of the comfort zones of these sort of structures and societies that we live in. And I'm going to suggest to you that we do need to do a little bit more of stepping outside of our comfort zone, because we have a lot of problems that can't be solved within. So two of the major problems that I focus a lot on in my life and my work are, well, the first of them is the global environmental crisis. It's still kind of debated, not really. I mean, 96% of scientists and upwards say that anthropogenic or human-caused climate change is happening. So there's no debate here, at this point, at least. This is actually a picture of the destruction after the recent typhoon in the Philippines, Typhoon Haiyan. One of the largest superstorms ever. It wreaked havoc on the nation. And these are happening more and more frequently, and they're wreaking more and more havoc each time. And still, I mean, most of the developed countries in the world that are primarily responsible for emitting the greenhouse gases that are facilitating the climate change, are doing little to curb the trends. So, I mean, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change from the United Nations just released a report about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, wherein they said that the environmental crisis is not going to leave anyone untouched. So that goes for people in developed countries, developing countries, which terminology I have a little bit of a problem with, but we'll just use it for now. And the second problem is poverty, but not just poverty. Poverty's always been a problem, it still is, but poverty in the context of intensifying inequality. So the 85 richest people in the world right now collectively own more financial assets than half of humanity, 3.5 billion people. That, to me, is really astounding. It's something that fits quite perfectly into this politics of practicality that says humans are just self-interested. Humans cannot think outside of themselves, cannot think outside of their own immediate interests. And to me, that just isn't true. Every day I see people thinking outside of their interests. Every day I see people putting their lives on the line to strive towards a better world. So we're going to talk a little bit about that sort of love's grateful striving. So I really love this quote. I read this a few years ago. It's an Emily Dickinson quote. It says, "I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose." And I just love this quote, first for the aspect of dwelling, sort of actively sitting in this sort of space of possibility where we can consciously imagine new things. And I like that she counterposes it to prose. So there's an alternative. We can sit in practicality. We can sit in these same old veins of problem solving, of solutions, of politics, and we can get nothing done, or nothing truly different, truly meaningful that can really ameliorate the crises that we face. So I'm going to spend the rest of this just really suggesting, or really looking at movements that I think embody possibility as a political concept. What it means to look for the possible rather than the practical, look for the difficult ways out. And look for ways that we can just lift that sort of canceled sticker off of the follow your dreams quote. So, Occupy. That's what I turned to first. I think it was a really awesome movement. I wish I could have been there, honestly. I wasn't. But to occupy, from the Latin, according to my good friend Ethan Miller from the University of Western Sydney, he says it means to seize a space. To seize a space against the status quo, against these same structures, these same sort of narrowly concerned politics that I was just talking about. And it's like Emily Dickinson's quote, it's an active state. You have to continue seizing it in the face of a lot of resistance because, let's face it, the structure is pretty ingrained at this point. It's been occurring at least in its current state for the past 30 or so years. The intensifying inequality, the global ecological crisis, that is. So I just really want to, a lot of people critique Occupy. A lot of people say that they didn't have a clear message, which makes sense, I guess. They kind of didn't have a clear message. They were kind of all over the place, but at the same time, why would they have a clear message? Because this was not about formulating a clear message that would fit into this sort of the structure. This was about creating new messages, hearing what Cornel West calls a cacophony of voices. It's like a jazz song. It's like a really intense, really meandering jazz song, you could say. That's the kind of politics that I'm about, at least. You don't have to agree with me, that's fine. But I want more of these cacophonies of voices. I want people to think outside of the box, to think outside of the structures. And to me, I read Occupy as actually a very intense story of love. Love of the world, love of people, love of imagination. And not letting the world, fall into shambles as the environmental crisis continues, not letting people continue to suffer when the financial resources, the resources more generally, are there to help them. It's just a matter of distribution, really. Most developed nations, quite honestly, overproduce food. It's a matter of distribution that people who are struggling to get food, to get basic resources, don't have them. And just really thinking about the imagery of Occupy Wall Street is really powerful, because we're talking about a lot of folks in tent cities in Zuccotti Park, right across from Wall Street. Probably the richest block on the face of the earth, it's likely. So just that imagery is stark. And Occupy, I think, reading it as a text, we can see that it is most of all not about formulating a clear message. It's about performance. It's about creating this stark contrast between the skyscrapers of Wall Street and the people down there on the ground practicing politics, practicing possibility, imagining alternatives. And Occupy isn't dead. It started in 2011, a couple years ago, but it spawned so many beautiful things still continues. Rolling Jubilee is one of them, where, a big part of the Occupy movement, going back a little bit, was really this issue of debt, the intensification of debt. And I know a lot of us here probably experience that right now, student debt. Student debt this year just topped $1 trillion in aggregate, so just in our nation. That's a lot of debt that students have. And how do people expect students to be the leaders of tomorrow, to be actually imagining new political alternatives when they're saddled with debt, when they're forced into bondage to these sorts of traditional jobs or things of that nature where they don't have the space, the mental, the physical space to actually go out and imagine the alternatives. So Rolling Jubilee, what it does is, apparently, first of all, banks sell debt at subprime rates. So banks accrue all this debt and they sell it, which is really interesting. I'll have to have a financier explain that to me later. I just don't get it. But they have bought a lot of this subprime debt from banks, and they've just eliminated it. So they've basically bought $15 million of debt, most of it health debt. So when people needed treatment, they would go into massive debt to be able to treat themselves, to be able to live. And Rolling Jubilee has just said, no, we're going to liquidate that. We're going to get rid of that debt and free you, basically, from having to continue paying the interest and the principal of this debt. Another one of my favorite movements, I don't actually know if this is a picture from it, I just really like this picture, like I want to be that person, but Occupy Gezi. So I think it was last year, but in Turkey, the government was threatening to basically start a new development project in this sort of park area, this green space in Turkey. So it started a movement because the people there were not giving up one of the last green spaces in the rapidly developing metropolitan area. So they, like Occupy, they came out, they occupied. And it grew and really became a social network phenomenon. I mean, people were tweeting this sort of hashtag Occupy Gezi all over the world, and it was really a global movement. And that's something, again, that Occupy did, was it made the local imminently global. So it really, for the first time in the world, just returning to the crises we face, these are truly global crises. These are truly crises that know no borders, so to speak. They know no national borders. They know they will affect everyone, as the IPCC report said. So we have to respond globally. And we have to also respond locally, because the global, if you think about it, is just an aggregate of tons and tons of localities that can be connected for better or for worse. And it's how we envision it, it's how we create it, it's how we imagine it. So, with that, I'll get to the really important things, the things you can do here on campus. So this is the global garment industry right here. Pretty daunting at first look. But this is how we fit in. You see the schools right here, Cornell, UCLA. We, as a school, have huge contracts with huge brands, Nike, Adidas, all sorts of things. We are a Nike school, but the fact remains that we have a huge contract, and therefore we have a lot of influence over what these brands do, how they operate, how they treat their workers, how they treat the environment in their locales where they're operating, and so we have a lot to say about that. So I'm going to tell you a little story of what you can do to imagine your own possibility here on campus. As you might know, if you know me, I'm part of this group called United Students Against Sweatshops. So I spend a lot of my time organizing and imagining that picture that I just showed you before. That picture of University of Alabama in the global garment industry, how it fits in, and what we can do to actually influence the lives of workers around the world. And through the course of this amazing organization, I've actually been able to talk to workers from Bangladesh, from the Dominican Republic, from El Salvador, from Honduras, from all over the world. And they say the same thing to me when I ask them what they need. They want monitoring. They want their most basic rights to be upheld. And repeatedly, I hear from them that schools should be affiliating with what's called the Worker Rights Consortium. The Worker Rights Consortium is the only independent labor watchdog organization in the world that monitors colleges and universities effectively. Independent meaning that it has no corporate influence, as a lot of monitors do, because they're sort of just there to appease corporations, and they're sort of there to act as these sort of faux monitors that aren't exactly doing anything. They're just names. The Worker Rights Consortium, like I said, no corporate influence, no union influence. They're completely independent, composed of labor experts, students, people on the ground in the various countries that are producing apparel around the world, that speak the languages, that visit the factories routinely that they're monitoring, and that ensure that these factories have safe working conditions. And if they do not, they will actually send reports to the schools that are sourcing from these factories and show them what's wrong. So this, on I guess your right, is a picture of the Rana Plaza factory. It collapsed last year, actually a year ago yesterday, killing 1,100 Bangladeshi workers. This was the largest factory collapse in the history of the industrialized garment industry. And they're happening more and more frequently. Bangladesh alone has had 6 or 7 factory collapses just in the last year, because this is really the hotspot of the garment industry right now. And it's entirely possible, in fact, that our school is sourcing from factories, not sturdy factories with structural imperfections like Rana Plaza. It's entirely possible that we're doing this right now. And it's Quite honestly, it's a very easy problem to fix if we just affiliate with the Worker Rights Consortium. Because we don't want another Rana Plaza happening, especially not in a place that's producing our apparel that we have direct influence over. So my suggestion to you all is to occupy campus. Not literally, I don't mean build 10 cities out on campus, though that would be cool, maybe, I don't know. Something to think about. But nonetheless, I want you to occupy campus, to consciously seize this space that you pay to be in, pay to take classes in, all those things. And I want you to see what change you can affect on campus. Whether it's with our group, whether it's envisioning yourself in the context of the global garment industry, whether it's with another group that's really consciously changing the space, consciously imagining new political possibilities and enacting them. And I want you to stand for it, to do it, to just do it. Because I know the whole Tide Talks tagline is ideas are revolutionary, but they're really not if there's no action that follows these ideas. They're really just ideas. So really it's about the element of performance, of getting together like this. This was our national conference this year at the University of Texas. I'm there somewhere in the back, see me? A little short, but happens. But yeah, so I want you all, it's my call to you. Actually, in the business, in the organizing business, I will actually call this an action item or an ask. I'm going to ask you, just to do my group of service and to do the workers around the world who are producing our clothes of service, to email the president, to call the president, to ask them to affiliate with the Worker Rights Consortium. Because we've been trying for a year now and it just hasn't happened. We've had meetings, but really we've seen nothing at this point materialize, and we want that to happen, not for our own sake, but like I said, for the sake of the workers in Bangladesh and the Dominican Republic and Haiti and all these places who I've talked to, and who say that this is a necessary step for any college or university that wants to have safe supply chains. So call, email. If that doesn't work, deliver a letter. If that doesn't work, come join our group. And together, we can occupy campus. We can make things happen. That's it.